Who is Greg Rupert?
Yeah.
And you're known to us. We know you a little better than just the guy who does Reserve My Court, but that's in the tennis world in Atlanta. That's certainly how you're known. So,
Yeah.
if you could give us an introduction and say who is Greg Rupert and what is Reserve My Court?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Greg Rupert, and I'm a lifetime, lifelong Georgia native. And I think I've heard you guys have conversations with some of your other guests and talk about how rare that is these days. But um, grew up in a small town called Monroe, Georgia, which is out towards the Athens area, and then went to school in Atlanta, Georgia Tech. Lived several different locations in Georgia, but predominantly around the Atlanta area. And really just after 2000, started getting into the tennis community in Atlanta a little bit. And I didn't grow up playing tennis, but started latching on to Alta like a lot of people do in the Atlanta area if you're into sports and being active. And started seeing a need just after that for some way to reserve courts other than walking down there and seeing what was on the board and seeing if there was even a sign up sheet even there anymore. Some kid probably came by and grabbed it and ran off with it. Who knows? So 2004 was really when we first started doing Reserve My Court. And it's, just grown since then. So really, we obviously it's a business. We're in the business of making money, but it's also, we do feel like we're integrated and into the tennis community, the fabric here in Atlanta. And I'm on the phone every day with, folks that are running clubs, either big clubs, or it could just be, the volunteer at the HOA who's been charged with making sure their tennis programs run there. So we've been doing that for a long time now, and it's grown, and it's been a steady process of improvement with us and reaching out and getting new clients and new customers. So yeah, that's it. We've been at it now for whatever the math is there, 18 years, which is just mind blowing for me. So
I think one of the fun parts of doing this, Shaun, is I started to try to track, after our phone call last night with Trevor, and then thinking about the career at NetCourt. I think NetCourt originated probably 98, 99 is when I got involved with them, because I remember it was really when we were trying to introduce NetCourt to the senior tour, or Alta to the senior tour, and NetCourt had a meeting before Alta. And in that, I saw Barb and Bart, and I was like, wow, for somebody who is so technologically inefficient, I'm completely enamored by it. So, NetCourt was my introduction, and it seems like right around that time frame is when tennis started to recognize the need for technology, first through the team management. I remember meeting a gentleman, I don't know if you ever knew John Reichel. He also tried to start a Reserve My Court feature, and we met with them through NetCourt, and his rates were outrageous. And I was like, well, John, I wish you nothing but success, because I believe tennis needs technology, but I got to be honest with you, I don't think what your price frame is going to work. I was working at White Columns Country Club at the time, big club. I said, they're not going to spend $4,000 a year on a reservation system. And he, well, no, it's going to happen. I said, John, like I said, good luck to you. And then Greg, I don't know, when did we start communicating? It was right in the beginning. Cause again, I always am on the lookout, and I said, oh, now this is what we're talking about.
I think it was pretty early on. I know. And of course, you weren't at Windermere, I think, at that time. I believe
Correct.
Jim Harp was over there at that time. And so Windermere was one of our very first customers. I think we had one small HOA that literally was the very first, and like in the Lawrenceville area. And then Windermere joined up, and that was like, wow, okay, we went from nobody to one of the bigger clubs in the whole city, joining up. But of course, in that process is really pretty indicative of what's happened throughout our history, where a big community or a big club signs up in an area. Of course, they're hosting lots of players coming in all the time for Alta matches, USTA matches, tournaments, you name it. And they're seeing the signs on the courts, Reserve My Court, and they're asking questions. What is that? How does that work? And that word of mouth is what, helps spread us around. And so, you could just see that happen. These little pockets, this club would pop in, and then around that club, we'd start seeing other communities sign up. And of course, that's happened in Atlanta, but it's also happened outside of Atlanta, especially I would say in the last 5 or 6 years, we would get a club in, say, the Houston area, and then you'd see it spread around Houston, or you'd see it, and it's all over. I think the oddest example, we have probably about a half a dozen clubs outside of the U.S. and a couple of them in Ireland. One of them signed up, and then a year later, the one next door signed up. So it's kind of an interesting process.
I think another one of the similarities that we're noticing is the grind associated with getting anything, especially technologically, going in tennis. It's not like we can turn to net news. Net news is a great information source, but everybody looks for that magic pill, and the magic pill seems to be, whether it be you, T2, Trevor with his events, door to door, a lot of grinding, a lot of word of mouth is the way your message spreads.
Oh yeah. I tell people these stories, and they sometimes they don't believe it, but the way we started out, when I first started this, I lived in the Marietta area. And on weekends, I would go around, I get out and this, it was at the very beginning of even Google Maps a little bit, but I would get out that I went in and, I found some ways of finding some addresses for these clubs and these communities. I pinned them on my maps, and I would drive around and post flyers on their bulletin board right next to their schedule, right next to their sign up schedule, with our information on it. And that, along with getting clubs signed up and putting our signs on the courts, it was 100% word of mouth. Occasionally I would, have a conversation with someone directly, but most of the time it was just feet on the ground, putting out flyers and getting it going. And yeah, it's, now we don't do that anymore. We have done that, and we have done waves and promotions and similar things like that, but now it's really just, it's word of mouth from our existing customer base. And you can't really have any better advertisement than people saying, hey, this system works great for us. So yeah, it's definitely the starting out of a business like that it's not that glamorous.
So what was the impetus? What was the stimulus to say, okay, other than obviously you look at it and say, well, there's a need, but you went above and beyond. So what brings someone to say, okay, I'm going to make this leap?
Yeah. I would say the very first impetus was the need for it for myself. So I was starting to play tennis. I lived in a neighborhood that had 2 courts, and they were really just about a 150 foot walk from my house. I couldn't see the courts from my house though. And I was just starting to play tennis, and a buddy of mine would play some pickup time and different things. And it was like, well, somebody's got to walk down there and look at this sign up sheet every time. And it was just a pain. And I was developing, my background's really not in computer science. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I had done in my mechanical engineering world, I had done a little bit of computer programming, a little bit of website building. So I volunteered to build a website for our community. This was before the big portals that are available now were out there. And so I built a website for our community. I thought, hey, I bet we could figure out a way to manage the courts on that website. And so the very first version of this was a way to make reservations on our community courts within the website that I built for our community. And then I thought, that seems like something other people would really want. And so then I spent about, a year and a half or so with just side time that I had, outside of my day job, building the very first version of ReserveMyCourt. And it's funny, it worked, and it sold and grew and all that. But I think with anybody's technology, they look back on it and kind of chuckle a bit about how some of it was kind of band-aided together, and
we used to call it paper clips,
baling wire behind the scenes, making
paper
it work.
Clips at NetCourt, exactly.
Yeah, but now it's interesting. COVID was just a horrible thing that's happened in the last couple of years for a lot of people. For the tennis world and for ReserveMyCourt, it was kind of a boon a little bit. I think there was a lot of growth in tennis, people getting out because they were cooped up and had nothing else to do. And this was a safe way to still get some exercise and meet people. And as a result, ReserveMyCourt grew significantly during that time. And we also, before it even started, we had made the decision to do a complete rebuild and invest in putting the stuff into the, I would say a world-class environment hosted by Amazon Web Services, and just really getting ourselves up into the modern age. And boy, we got lucky with the timing. We did that. We started that process at a time when COVID hit. And honestly, I had a significant amount of free time to work on that. And so that worked out well for us. So with with COVID happening, there was a significant growth. But also, I tell you the other thing, and I'm sure you guys are seeing this, pickleball is just exploding. I can't even, it's hard to even relate how fast I see it growing. And I would say every week we're getting multiple sites saying, hey, we're adding pickleball. We're either restriping our existing courts, or we're adding actual physical pickleball courts. And because we handle things by the courts, our fee structure is based on the number of courts you have. That's also been a pretty big boon for us as well. I mean, these extra courts that people are adding, these extra amenities to make reservations on, it's amazing. It's exploding.
That's an interesting thought, because in that case, do you get to kind of double up? So you look at, I've got 2 tennis courts. I just striped them for pickleball courts. Does that mean I'm going to have 2 tennis courts in my reservation system at ReserveMyCourt, and I'm going to have 2 pickleball courts? So now I'm paying for 4, so you can reserve them separately. Like, I think that'd be a bad way to do it if I was
not exactly. No, it's not quite like that. What way we charge is by the reservable amenity. So if it's something you're taking reservations for in our system, we're charging you for it. Now we cap out if you have 6 or more amenities. So once you get to scale, we can't keep charging you for every single amenity. If you're running a big facility with 12 court, nobody would pay that. So we cap once you get to 6. But so like what you're describing, where a club has let's say they have a single tennis court with a single pickleball stripe on top of it. That's still really one thing. You can only use it as one thing, right? I mean, you may be playing pickleball on it, you may be playing tennis, and I advise, we have some clubs that will go in and set it up just like you described. That I said, don't do that, because you're going to pay double. Don't do that. But now, if you have a single court with 2 sets of pickleball courts, 2 pickleball courts on top of a single tennis court, and you want to take reservations for all 3 of those things, sort of I'll say independently, they're linked, then yeah, I mean, in that case, that's 3 things you're reserving. And our newer system now handles that, pretty elegantly. If you reserve 1 pickleball court, it prevents you from reserving the tennis court. If you reserve the tennis court, it keeps you from reserving both pickleball courts. And so yeah, to some degree, it is an added component to some sites, but some clubs it's not. It depends on how they've set it up.
Shaun, I got to go back a minute. I can't let Greg get off the hook. And we've had this friendly argument on numerous occasions. Greg cannot talk about pricing because I've yelled at him over the years that he is way too cheap. The service he provides, he deserves more than what he has historically asked for. And, it's a testament to him that he does it. And it shows that it was about passions first, and then say, okay, I still got to keep the player in mind. But, Greg and I have gone back and forth on this. And even with the improvements, he's barely raised his rates. So,
yeah, no, I appreciate that. And of course, I hope, potential customers out there hear that and say, oh, okay, well, this guy's, trying to keep his prices reasonable. I think there's no perfect answer for what the right price is. I mean, I'm not so altruistic that I wouldn't want to charge what we could make for it if we really could make more. I guess, I always look at the feature set and say, what's this worth? And, we serve a broad array of user, club types. I mean, we've got the large, 20 court type clubs that have, numerous on-site staff, and that's a completely different animal almost than a lot of our customer base, which is an HOA environment where there's 2 courts or 4 courts maybe. There's no staff. There's no on-site pro shop. There's just a volunteer who's on the HOA board as the tennis rep. So that club, they're going to have a tolerance for how much they're willing to pay every year for this. I get that. There are competing, of course, tools out there just like ours. And there's also, and honestly, I would say it's the biggest risk in our business, these portals that the management companies bring to the table, which allow the homeowner association to see the minutes from the board meetings, to pay their annual dues, to to put in an application to change the color of their house, whatever, all their guidance documents, everything to do with that neighborhood, they'll typically have a reservation solution in there as well. Now, what we've heard through the grapevine from clubs that have used both and different things is, yeah, they have them. They're just not that sophisticated. They can't handle the complexities of the things we want to do with our rules and limiting reservations by type. And I mean, all this kind of things that clubs get into for trying to manage their courts effectively. It's just not built for that, because it doesn't come from this world. This world here where we know, you might have to have a level called captain, where the captain can reserve their schedule well in advance, versus just a regular user who's reserving ad hoc, T2 matches or whatever. These reservation systems don't really understand all that. But anyway, regardless, because of those competing angles and the cost that they charge, and it's already, if for some cases it's free for them because they've already got this portal, we're conscious of what we're charging. We want it to be in line with the value, and we think we're close. I mean, I agree that maybe we could be a little higher. We did just bump our prices a little bit, like everybody else in the world, on everything this year. What we've also said too is, as we add features and as we add better service, then we'll consider maybe it's time for an upgrade on the pricing. So this summer, we've told folks we're working hard to get our app built up a little better, added features, and we are working on that. And I mean, perhaps when that comes out, if it's very slick and does a lot of things that people really love, then maybe we'll look at a pricing again. I don't know.
Well, the other fun part about what we try to do is focus predominantly on Atlanta. So I'm going to go back again. What I love is the origin story, because it so mimics NetCourt. Barb and Bart got together and they decided to create a team management system for their teams. And
Right.
through that, NetCourt came to being. So that I love the consistency. And the other point you just brought up, consistent with Atlanta, and I think this bodes well for the success and the future success of ReserveMyCourt, is Tennis Point, the team management service, went through a kind of similar situation when Alta brought the team management within the ecosystem of Alta.
Yeah.
And yet there was so little attrition from Tennis Point, because people talk to what you're talking about, say, look, it does what we want it to do. We've been with it a long time. There is a loyalty factor.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to stay with it. And I do believe you'll see a lot of the same with ReserveMyCourt if and when that ever happens. So it bodes well for the Atlanta market.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's funny, that team management issue. We had considered adding some of those capabilities inside our system as well. You think about it, for a club, we already have all their user information, and it would seem like it'd be very easy to say, okay, this guy's a captain. Hey, go build your roster out of your members and maybe some outside members, whatever. We had thought about doing some of that, and then Alta announced what they were doing, and we just said, look, there's a lot of people already doing that and doing it very well. I use those tools you're talking about as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been crazy hyper focused on making sure we want to add new features and we want to add new capabilities, but at the same time, we want to make sure that our core function, what we really are trying to do, we do in a very, in a great way. And if we're not doing it in a great way, if we have gaps there, then why should I be wasting time on developing new things when I should be making this the best it can be? And so we've always been that way from the beginning, which is why we've been very slow to add new things over the years. It's really about identifying any gaps we have in the service that we're trying to offer already and make sure we're making everybody super happy with that. And
keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that being said, I mean, I think we're real close to that. I mean, we know there's some improvements and some upgrades and some things we want to do on the mobile app, but the site itself, we're pretty close to this thing getting optimized now after 18 years. So.
Well, we always laugh that when we talk to people about how Atlanta is a very unique market. in that most people think of a tennis club, and as you've already said, it is so HOA driven that it really doesn't. And even at the big clubs, the Atlanta Athletic Clubs, the Atlanta Country Clubs, they usually use whatever golf is using because
Right.
tennis is an amenity. It doesn't, if tennis makes any money, they're excited because really it's the membership dues that are paying it. What do you see with the Houston area when you go to someplace else? Do you see more likely clubs or neighborhoods? How does it play out in other places?
Yeah, it's definitely more the club environment for sure. I would say our second biggest area is sort of that South Florida area. And there some of these are communities, and so it's a mix. I think the difference is this: you have the communities there, you have the club environments there, but those communities are typically very large scale communities with a bunch of courts. So they're almost like a tip. I don't know. There's a fine line between this club community concept, right? I mean, there's obviously clubs that are literally have no association with a home with a HOA environment or with homes. But even in Atlanta, a lot of the clubs are just really large communities, right? And they just have enough scale to have a full scale tennis program there.
And in Florida, you'll have a lot more like Bobby is at Windermere, where there's a
Yes.
neighborhood with a full-time tennis program.
Absolutely.
Where
That's
my neighborhood, there's just a couple of courts, a pickleball court, and we live here. But there isn't a dedicated program. There's not a dedicated pro. In Florida, you have a lot more of that because you're going to have those clay courts that need maintenance. So you might end up with a 2-court facility that has a pro that wants to use your pro console, where you can do more than just court reservation. You can actually, like a club automation type of system, be able to, I don't know if club automation is a generic term or if somebody actually is a business called club automation.
No, there is a club automation business.
Okay, so I need to find a generic term to use so I'm not promoting something else.
Yes.
Like club programming software that can help that one guy. I got a friend I played college tennis with. He's down there running a small little neighborhood and would love that pro console that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that definitely is more of what you see in these outside of the Atlanta area. So for those areas, Houston, South Florida, Southern California, I mean, all the places that you think of as being big tennis areas. But that being said, I mean, I tell you, what's interesting is we have grown out. We purposefully, when we rebuilt the site and the service, we kind of almost rebranded from the word ReserveMyCourt to RMC. And some of the thinking there was we wanted to make sure people understood that we didn't just do tennis courts. We really handle any kind of in that. And we also started using the language, instead of saying court, we call it an amenity. And the reason is that it could be anything. It really could be. And so when you look through our database now, it's predominantly tennis courts, but you got basketball, you got other sports courts, first of all. So basketball, pickleball, croquet. We've got clubs that do croquet pitches, swim lanes. And then there's stuff that have nothing to do with that, like pavilions, clubhouses, you name it. So especially within our HOA environment, we've tried to promote to them, hey, you're using this service for your 2 tennis courts. How about the pavilion that's sitting right next to it that you also now, Sally has to take phone calls from a neighbor to say, hey, we want this for a birthday party. Just put it in our system and we'll handle it.
And do I know that I can use ReserveMyCourt to also reserve my pool? Absolutely. And you guys did a good job of rebranding to just say, hey, we're just RMC right now. Yeah. It doesn't matter how we started. Like if it was Shaun Boyce Enterprises in the beginning, right now it's tennis for children. Like let's take about what it could be, not necessarily taking away our main core product, which is space reservation. When you make that more generic, it scales itself.
That's right. And it has. We've grown a lot in that area, for sure. I mean, I haven't gone through to look to see what the percentages are, but we do definitely have a significant number of reservable amenities in our system now that are not tennis courts. And I mean, tennis is always going to be the core of what we do, and that's always the driver. I mean, we're always the feature sets that we build and the way you can construct rules, custom rules for your club in terms of how reservations can be made and all that stuff. That's almost always going to be driven by that tennis environment. But that being said, there's no reason not to be able to reserve other things in there as well.
So what have you done at RMC to address being an industry that inherently has been technologically adverse and approach it?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. Early on, it was definitely swimming upstream for sure. I mean, we would talk to a pro running a club, this idea of putting everything online. There was a lack, they felt like they were losing control a little bit, hey, we like people being able to call the front desk and us look at the schedule and make sure that we know what's going on. And we still run into that a little bit where folks are a little bit hesitant to give control, like allow people to just go see the schedule and just make their own reservations. For some people, that makes them very uncomfortable. But I would say that I have seen a shift. We started this a long time ago, and we're starting to get into the paper. Some of those folks are aging out, let's say, and there's a newer wave of people moving in, and they're much more comfortable with technology. In fact, they demand it. They're puzzled when they have to do something in an antiquated way, and it just drives them crazy. So even in our system where we've maybe had, been a little slow in getting something rolled out, a feature or something, and people say, they'll say it's 2020. Why am I having to do it this way? So early on we had to work hard to overcome some of those hang-ups and old school mentality, I would say, but I feel like that's definitely changing a lot. And there's just an aging out of, I think, people maybe our age.
It's true on all levels.
Especially your age, Bobby, right now.
Exactly. I mean, that's what we say. Old, 50 plus tennis pros are becoming dinosaurs. That
Right.
The industry's having a hard time replacing. I shouldn't say dinosaurs, unfortunately, because they still dominate the industry, and they have a tendency to coach to their level of play, and the level of play is dramatically different. And I know we're running out of time. We don't want to keep you too long, but you keep giving me more questions, and I want to go after first, and you can do this quickly, is what is in the water at Georgia Tech? Because I think
no kidding. Is this the third court reservation system?
Court reservation system
out of Georgia Tech?
Out of Georgia Tech. The three of them all in the Atlanta area that got into court. Nobody to the levels that you've accomplished, but still, what goes on at Georgia Tech?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say what goes on there these days. My nephew, who has helped me at times with the site, was a computer science guy at Georgia Tech and has graduated from there now and working on his own accord. But I don't know. I will say that at least the culture used to be, and probably the folks you're running into at least experienced this culture, and I think it's probably still there, is, it's like a culture it's a beat down culture. Like it's the school just tries to beat you down until you toughen up to make it out, and if you talk to those Georgia Tech guys, they talk to each other, they never say, when did you graduate? They say, when did you get out? I mean, that's literally, nobody says, when did you graduate? So when did you get out? I mean, it's like being in prison, right? Like, when did you get out? So I don't know. It's just, I have always said, I think there are probably some schools that may have better professors and they may teach better. I don't know. I didn't have that experience, but as far as just toughening you up and, putting you out there on your own, where it's like you're going to have to survive on your own or you're not going to make it. That's the biggest thing I think you get out of the environment down there. So, and I hope that's still the case. I mean, I know they've, it used to be when I was a freshman, the intro, when you went to orientation, they gave the speech about look to your left, look to your right, and only one of you is going to be here when it's done. I think they graduated at a higher rate now. They've been kind of pushed into that. At that time, they had the lowest graduation rate of any public school in the country.
Wow.
So it was pretty hardcore.
Well, I can definitely agree, because that's when you talk to the athletic department, one of the things they always say is the difficulty of compliance, that the standards between the student athlete and the normal student population is one of the closest. I think it's Georgia Tech and Notre Dame above Ivy League schools. So that speaks volumes to what you're just saying there. And let me rest assure everybody listening that TCU did not have those problems. I think we were really early on trying to put the 4-year plan into, make it obsolete. We stayed as long as we could. So I just want to be clear there. And then secondly, real quick about, again, the technology you started, it was computer based. It was the dawn of the internet. Now we're going, everything is phone based, and we're
Yes.
gravitating. And like you said, you have a generation that doesn't release their phone, and you've had to keep up with what have you done, and how do you address that?
Yeah, that has really been our bane, I would say, because, you know, the one thing about technology that is kind of a, you know, it's just the nature of the beast is it constantly changes. And so you can't just sit around with what you got, because 3 years later, it won't work, or it won't look right at all. So yeah, for sure. When we first started, there was no smartphone really, or it was just coming around a little bit later. So, you know, the first thing was just trying to make the website look good on the phone. And a lot of that, now that responsive technology is stuff we built into the new site, which is one of the major upgrades. Our old site really was never built with a phone, and the idea of you looking at it on a phone, it was never a thought. The new site, of course, that is all integrated in. And then just the mobile apps too. We've always, you know, the website has always come first and the mobile app behind it. And of course, to your point, these days, I mean, a lot of people tell us we're not ever using a computer to look at this. So we find about half of our reservations are going through the mobile app and about half through the website. And so that's why we're kind of prioritizing making sure that mobile app is a focus for us moving forward, because, you know, I would imagine that number will continue to shift. And in the next, you know, 2 years from now, if we have this conversation, I bet it'll be 80-20. It'll be 80% mobile and 20%, you know, through a PC. So we are just continuing to focus on that. We know it's a priority.
Well, we appreciate it, Greg. Appreciate your time. Shaun gets to ask you one more question that we try to give all of our guests to shape the world. So Shaun, have at it.
It's my favorite question, which is the king of tennis. So if Greg Rupert was the king of tennis, is there anything you would change? So whether you view it as Atlanta specific or for the entire world, the universe, is there something that you would change about tennis as king of tennis yourself?
Well, Shaun, as you get to know me more, you're going to find out my scope is bigger than just tennis. I'd be the king of more than tennis, but I will broaden it a little bit. And this is a topic, by the way, guys, you could have hour-long conversations with me about and bring in other people. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this, but I just really, as a parent who's just got 2 kids getting out of the house now, who've gone through the youth sports world and coaching. I've coached a lot, not tennis. I'm not a tennis coach, but baseball and these kinds of things. I have a real issue with our sports culture right now. I love sports, grew up playing sports. I think youth sports are awesome. They do teach so many good things. But unfortunately, you know, it's gotten so monetized. And I don't know, and I really can't say that this is specific to tennis, because my kids really never got heavily involved in tennis as kids. But a lot of other sports, you know, I just see parents asking things of their kids they shouldn't be asking of them to do. Huge amounts of time spent on a single sport in this, what seems to me, this illogical goal of getting a scholarship. And, you know, we're blessed to live in a state like Georgia, where if you have just reasonably good grades in high school, you can get the Hope Scholarship. If you have really good grades, you can get the Zell. You can go to school in the state of Georgia, in any state school, Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, West Georgia, all these schools, all great schools, are almost free if you just focus on school. I mean, and so at the same time, our parents are, you know, we're working hard to get our kid into this, you know, special program. And, you know, these kids burn out. How many of them ever really make a living off of that sport? I mean, I don't know. It just seems like we've taken the fun out of it. We've taken the things that we're trying to teach out of it, you know, the good sportsmanship and being a good teammate and having fun and all those things. We've just taken it away. We've monetized it. We charge for it. We focus so heavily on getting our kid this scholarship that they could get easily if they just focused on something that's actually going to help them more as an adult. So I don't know. I'd love to hear. And I know, Shaun, I know you're in the, you know, the teaching kids. And I don't want to just be confused. I think my coaching was one of the best things I ever did. I loved coaching kids. There's value, so much value in that for kids. And so I don't know the solution. I just know that I see it getting ugly. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Well, as you said, that is a whole different conversation. And boy, oh boy, I mean, because you got the right. My father, just real quick, my father grew up when I was a kid, ran a little league and did it volunteer. 800 child little league, everything was supplied. You paid it. All right, this is a long time ago, a $20 registration fee. You didn't buy your bats. You didn't buy your balls. You had to come with a glove and your cleats. Everything else was supplied to you. And he did it for probably through the span of mine, and my brother's 8 years younger, so he stayed involved with it. So maybe he did it for 15 years. The gentleman who took over from him privatized it, made it a family-run business, and took a salary for the same things my father did 15 years for free, where essentially I got a new pair of cleats every year from the sporting goods store because my father brought them so much business. So right. I'm with you. It is a different conversation, especially within tennis as well, where you're not even allowed to cheer. As a parent going to a USTA match, you're not allowed to cheer. You're not allowed to offer encouragement. And, I was a baseball player and I lived for the crowd screaming. So not to have that in tennis was a tough adjustment. There's no question about it. The whole culture was so much difficult for me to get adjusted to. So amen to that. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
All right, Shaun, we're done.
I don't know this, like a lot of things these days. I see the problem. I don't really know the answer. And when it comes to things like changing people's behavior, it's challenging. And I'm a big free market guy, so I understand when people build businesses around this. I don't want anybody stepping in and stopping them. I just wish I think it comes down to the parents. I just wish the parents would embrace a new mentality. And look, I fell victim to this too. My kids were playing baseball and softball, and I grew up playing that. And so I coached, and we started out in rec like everybody does. And then they were pretty good. So some of those local travel programs became available to them. And I bought into it too. I helped coach some of those teams. And you're thinking in the back of your head, my kid's pretty good. I don't have any illusions that they're going to be, the next Freddie Freeman or anything, but I don't want to hold them back either. I want them to have an opportunity to play a better competition and get good coaching. And so all these things make sense at the time, but in the long run, I look back on it with regret. I wish we had just stayed in some rec stuff, because my son, who went from one to the other, then stopped playing, and because he just wasn't enjoying it anymore. He came back to rec at like 17 with a bunch of his buddies, and I helped coach that. It was the best time they ever had. They were loving life, just playing pickup. Basically, I wouldn't pick up, but playing a rec league at 17 years old. So I look back on some of that with regret, I wish we'd just stayed that path the whole way.
Yeah, I know how parents. In that case, I wouldn't suggest regret.
Yeah,
because there's no regret there. It worked out. Your son got back into it, and it seems to have played out well.
Sure, no, I hear you, but I think there could have been some years there where they would have had a lot more fun and
play some tennis.
Yeah,
or more tennis. And we get a lot of that where we get and I appreciate that answer. One of the things we're going to start doing, we'll have to do this, Bobby, for 2023, which is we'll remind everybody, hey, we're going to give you the king of tennis question, but we also are looking for a solution. Because what we get a lot is we get this same thing. They say, well, I'd change this, but I have no idea how. We want to make it more accessible. I have no idea how. We want to make it more affordable. We have no idea how. Right. And there are a lot of things that we want to change about the industry or the culture. And as you say, well, it comes down to the parents, but we have no idea how. So one of the things we're trying to do with this conversation is hopefully if we have enough of this conversation, we will eventually find some answers and figure out how. And if we can offer that, especially just in Atlanta, we stick with the culture that we know. Yeah. We know it here. We can hopefully make some changes without saying we have to change the whole world. And, we don't know what it's like in Europe or Asia. Let's stick with what we know, and we'll see if we can find some answers here. Well, Greg, I really appreciate your time, and this has been a lot of fun. We will definitely follow up because I know we're going to try to do some business together with GoTennis and with ReserveMyCourt. And I know Bobby's still talking with you. I think you guys are still talking about Windermere. and some of that there. So again, I appreciate your time, and we will follow up. We'll have to do at least every year with somebody like you, and you're welcome to come on more often than that. But a year from now, say, okay, a year ago, you said, now we need an answer. So you got 365 days to come up with an answer, or at least one potential solution. And we'll do it. If you can come up with it sooner, we'll bring you back sooner.
Okay. And Greg, I'm going to give you
thanks, Shaun and Bobby. Appreciate it.
Let you feel good about something. Just real quick about what you said about the free market. We run a program, high school team oriented for tennis, that has really excelled over the last year and a half, and we can see where we're pulling some of the kids from to see that they want a more relaxed environment, one that is not so emphasized. What's the next level? Let's enjoy it for today. So, as you said, the free market does work. It might take longer than we want. We're instant gratification, but it's working. It is working.
Yeah.
Again, thank you, Greg. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, same here, guys. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.